Our speaker and the zombie is arriving, so I'm sorry for keeping you waiting. We will start in about 10 minutes.
No, I can go
Okay.
straight.
So let me say a few things. So you will start sitting there with
Yeah.
Suzanne,
Yeah.
and I will do a presentation
Yeah.
of the event and introduce you, Suzanne and Gloria. And after that, I will leave the stage for you
Yeah.
to give your presentation
Yeah.
and your yoik.
Yeah.
And then after that, after your presentation, we're gonna put Gloria's keynote through Zoom.
Yeah.
And after that, you're gonna announce that Suzanne
Yeah.
will present.
Yeah.
And after she presents, you're gonna moderate the conversation. So Gloria's gonna be on the screen.
Yeah.
You're gonna be able to see her there and there.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
and
So I go right from the yoik to my presentation.
yes. So
Yes.
after I leave the stage, you go
Okay.
first.
Yeah.
Just so that I say thank you and welcome to
Yeah.
everyone.
Yeah. And how long was that? Is it 20 minutes?
20 minutes, 15.
Okay.
Yeah, whatever you need.
Okay.
It's okay. Do you
Yeah.
want this to have?
Yeah, that would
He
be
will
wonderful.
give it to you.
Yeah. One here.
Okay.
One, two.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
I will call Suzanne on stage. You
Yeah.
can maybe stay there. I will give the introductory words.
Yes.
Ready? Yeah. Okay, thank you so much for your patience. Good afternoon. Welcome, everyone. My name is Manuela Hansen, and I am the assistant to the curator and managing editor of the exhibition, The Milk of Dreams. I would like to open with some words of gratitude. Thank you so much to today's speakers for accepting our invitation, for everyone for coming to the theater, to our second day of programming, and to those connecting online. I also want to thank Cecilia Alemani, the curator of the exhibition, my colleague Marta Papini, the artistic organizer of the show, and the Biennale team, Dorn Brandmeier, Marina Bertaglia, Ilaria Zanella, and Raffaele Cinotti. This afternoon is the fourth event in the 5-day meetings on our program for the Milk of Dreams. Every day at 10 a.m. and 5 p.m. until Saturday, June 11th, we are hosting a series of keynote speeches and roundtable discussions to renew conversation around surrealist artist Leonora Carrington, whose work inspired the title and themes of the show. This is a very special gathering. We are honored of having legendary feminist art critic, art historian Gloria Orenstein, who will connect through Zoom. So Gloria will give a keynote speech, recorded, and we hope she will be online, live. We might have some connectivity issues, but hopefully we will have her with us today. And we are also having critic and author Susanne Christensen and Professor Sámi Joiker and the Zombie to explore and celebrate the marvelous and unexpected interconnections between Leonora Carrington and Indigenous Sámi people, whose nation extends across the Nordic countries of Norway, Sweden, Finland, and into the Kola Peninsula in Russia, via the work of Gloria Orenstein. So the event will go as follows. Ande, Gloria, and Suzanne will give a presentation each, and then have a conversation to discuss Indigenous Sámi spirituality, Leonora Carrington's work, and our relationship with nature. We will then be screening the beautiful animated 16-minute film, Gloria's Call, which captures Gloria's journey into art and surrealism, ecofeminism, and shamanism. Our speakers will open to questions after the screening, so please hold them, and we will be wrapping up at around 7:15 p.m. or so. And now I have the pleasure to introduce our speakers. Gloria Orenstein is University Professor Emerita in Comparative Literature and Gender Studies from the University of Southern California. Her areas of research have ranged from women's studies in contemporary art, literature and culture, ecofeminism in the arts, surrealism, woman and surrealism, shamanism, and Jewish women artists. Her first book, The Theatre of the Marvelous, Surrealism and the Contemporary Stage, paved the way for her pioneer work on the women of Surrealism. She wrote about and was a friend of Leonora Carrington since 1971, and during her research, Orenstein discovered a strong connection between Carrington and Sami people. In the mid-1970s, Carrington publishes The Hearing Trumpet. Marian Leatherby, the novel's narrator, is a 92-year-old woman who wants to travel to Sápmi. In the novel, it's called Lapland, but today is known as Sápmi, as she thinks that Sápmi is the more magical place on earth. In the 1980s, Gloria is invited by the shaman of Sápmi, Ellen Marit, to be a student with her in Alta, Norway. And seeing her practice as a continuation of Marian Leatherby from Carrington's novel, Orenstein travels to Sápmi, having there a spiritual experience and a journey that continued intermittently for almost 5 years. In the film Gloria's Call, Orenstein wonders if she brought the fictional character Marian to Sápmi, and it identifies with the ending of Carrington's The Hearing Trumpet, where it reads, quote, "If the old woman can't go to Lapland, then Lapland must come to the old woman," end quote. Susanne Christensen is a Danish-Norwegian art critic and writer, and editor of Norwegian Art Yearbook, who recently published a long book essay on Leonora Carrington titled Leonora's Journey, for which she received the Danish Georg Brandes Award 2020. Susanne travels to New York, Mexico, and California in the footsteps of Carrington, searching for her life and work. The book is a fascinating and knowledgeable book about the power of surrealism, feminism, art, science fiction, mysticism, ecology, and insanity, and it also connects Sápmi to Carrington through Gloria Orenstein's journey. And the Zombie is a Sami activist and has been a yoiker since 1974. Zombie grew up in the Sami village Sirma, a town in the Samiland territories of northern Norway, with an upbringing in reindeer herding and Arctic farming. He holds a PhD in law and is associate professor of the Faculty of Law at the Norwegian Arctic University. Zombie is also the elder for the artist Anders Suna, who is participating at the Sami Pavilion in this 2022 edition of La Biennale di Venezia. Zombie is a noaidi, a shaman, and we are delighted he will be speaking on Sami spiritual aspects and moderating this event. We also have the honor that Ande will open with a yoik performance, which is a deeply spiritual and semi-improvised vocal tradition practiced by the Sami people. And now I would turn the microphone over to Ande. The floor is all yours. Thank you very much.
How do we know who we are? Often we need a mirror. And when we are a person, we need another person to mirror us. And my people, the Sami people, has been serving as a mirror for Europe for a very long time, because we have been carrying many of the aspects of otherness. First time when the Sami are recorded in the European saga is when the Roman historian Tacitus writes about us. So we are present in the very first records of European history, and thereby we are a European people. Tacitus writes about us that we are shockingly poor, but we are extremely happy. It's not a long story about us, and the characteristics are somewhat charming. We have been living on the top of Europe, carrying this otherness, being from north of everything. And our traditional religion has been a shamanistic religion. Like very many aspects of our culture, our language, our yoik that you will get to meet in a moment here, our clothing, and even our food and our upbringing of children has been stigmatized. So therefore, many of our people are even today a little bit shy about our pre-Christian religion, the shamanistic religion. I thought I should point out three aspects of the shamanistic tradition that we come from. One is that we have a pantheon, a whole society of gods, different gods, like in the meeting between Elle-Mæret Gaup Dunfjell and Leonora Carrington, the female gods were focused on. But we have a whole society of gods. And that's not very special, because the Romans and the Greeks also had a pantheon, many gods. But then we have one thing that is more special, and that is the idea of transformation. That we, in our traditional thinking, we have this idea that a human can transform to an animal, and a human can then transform back. So we have that fragments and echoes of that even today in our Sami language. Råt stig umpen, started to run wolf. And then we have the idea that the mode of existence, the world, is not one world, but there are many worlds. And then we have somebody who ought to travel between these worlds. And that was oftentimes the shaman. And Elle-Mæret Gaup Dunfjell was one of the practicing shamans in modern times. But the Sami world is not a world of uniformity. It's a world of diversity. So we have like 10 different lingual traditions. We have a bunch of yoik traditions, and we also have variations between our religious thinking. So in some areas we think that there are 7 different modes of existence, and then there are other that have 3 modes of existence, and then 5 modes of existence. So the idea with the shaman was that the shaman should be a very sensitive person in order to get the messages from the underworlds, because sometimes it can be hard messages to get. But you have to have this rare combination of a huge sensitivity on one hand and strength, the strength to see the ugliness of life, and then to be able to administer that. So, for example, if a child was hearing ghosts in a room, then we used to think that, oh, that is a person carrying this sensitivity. Let's hope that she won't be scared out of that, because we would need her capacities. One of the yoiks that I thought I should wrap up this little introduction, so you have got the sketches of the Sami spirituality and the ways of thinking. And it is this little poem, The Mosquito. The mosquito is the most living thing on this planet. And the mosquito says that if I haven't arrived until midsummer, you know, our context is that we have a spring that lasts for 7 minutes. In 7 minutes, all the leaves will become green. The birds will unpack their suitcases and start singing. The insects will start to fly, and the flowers will start to flourish. It all takes 7 intense minutes. And in this intensity, the mosquito says that if I haven't arrived until midsummer, I will come even with crutches. And it says, the mosquito says that I sting you because blood is so sweet. I sting you because it's through this little sting that you notice that you are alive. But the day when the crows turn white, then I'm finished with my task, which is to guarantee the continuance of life.
this compute. Okay, so you can start.
Okay. This story takes us back to July 1971. At that time, I was a graduate student in comparative literature at New York University, writing my dissertation on surrealism in theater that would eventually become my book, The Theater of the Marvelous. I kept my summer free to finish writing my dissertation. My advisor, Professor Balakian, had asked me to include something on Latin American surrealist theater in my dissertation. And in the early 70s, there was literally nothing to be found in the university libraries or in the New York Public Library. I was desperate to find something. In those days, I had a friend, Joanne Potlitzer, who had created TOLA, the Theater of Latin America. She told me about a surrealist woman playwright in Mexico that she knew. She suggested that I write to a Leonora Carrington. Since Joanne was focused on theater and I was in comparative literature, we were not aware of Leonora Carrington as the great visual artist we were soon to discover her to be. And we knew very little about her plays. I wrote to her immediately, telling her about my graduate work, and she did not answer. After waiting several weeks, Joanne said she was returning to Mexico and could visit Leonora for me and ask about why she hadn't answered my letter. Leonora informed Joanne in no uncertain terms that she had no interest in academics. She would like to know why the feminists in New York were burning their bras. Another aspect of my life was my activity with the feminist movement, my creation of the Women's Salon for Literature. I sat down immediately and wrote a new letter to Leonora, explaining that when I would finally be awarded my doctorate, I'd be able to teach what I thought was most important, and I would definitely want to include her creative work in my course. I was hoping to find a position as a university professor. She immediately sent me some money to purchase feminist books for her, and she sent a letter giving me permission to contact the theater of Jean-Louis Barrault and Madeleine Renaud in Paris and request copies of their journal where her plays had been published. Finding myself without any research or documentation to consult for the moment, I somehow decided I had simply better purchase a Mexican dress. My unusual idea was that the energy from the Mexican dress would eventually penetrate my entire being and reach my brain, giving me insight into the meaning of her plays. Later, I would call this practice, literally a first for me, the methodology of the marvelous. During the first period of my correspondence with Leonora, she began to send me humorous greeting cards and letters with articles about the student revolution in Mexico tucked inside of them. The cards and letters often addressed me as Dear Grandma and Dear Grandpa. I kept wondering what she could be thinking. In one of her greetings, I found enfolded and hidden deeply within its center an article about her visual art with color reproductions taken from a Mexican journal. Upon seeing those extraordinary images, I felt as if I actually knew her painted world. I remembered it from a different incarnation. What could it be? I did not even know what I meant by that. It was a moment of epiphany when I suddenly became aware of a vast mystery that had overtaken me, as if a strong voltage had shaken me to the very core. Her imagery was so familiar, yet so strange. I couldn't believe that nothing had been written about such an amazing artist. Why was her work never mentioned in my courses that I took on surrealism? I did not know then that women in all fields had been omitted from the historical record. Leonora told me that all the male artists had important books on their art, but that she and the other women, quote, had been shelved, completely erased, written out. I decided I had to find a way to write about her in my dissertation, and eventually I purchased a Mexican dress in Greenwich Village. On July 6, 1971, I put on the Mexican dress and raised my arms upward to address the cosmos. I then spoke these words: if I can't go to Mexico, let Mexico come to me. I had no idea where this gesture came from, as I had never done such a thing before. I was about to leave the apartment to have dinner with Miss Joanne, and just as I was closing the door behind me, the phone rang. I went back to answer it, and to my enormous surprise, a woman with an impressive deep voice and English accent greeted me, asking if Gloria Orenstein were there. When I told her she had me on the phone, she said, "This is Leonora Carrington." I'm in New York and I didn't want to leave without meeting you first. I was literally in shock at the synchronicity of the words I had just spoken to the cosmos and an almost immediately reply from her. I began to tell her about this, how she might not believe that this had actually happened. But she said, "Of course I do, Gloria. I'm a witch." Leaving me to digest that information, she invited me to meet her at the Chelsea Hotel, and Joanne joined us for dinner there. She greeted us with her hands making the signs of the horns of the moon. "What's that?" I inquired, quite mystified. "Those are the holy horns, Gloria." "The holy horns of what?" I inquired in all my naivete. "The holy horns of consecration." She seemed to have boomed this at me. "Consecration of what?" I asked again in total innocence. "Of the goddess," she thundered with insistence. I had never heard of the goddess in the singular before. That first evening, she wanted to get some important things out of the way. "Let's get this over with right now, Gloria. I am a witch, and I've been in a madhouse." These pronouncements marked my initiation into what was to become for me an entree to what was then known as the Great Goddess Movement in feminist spirituality. I began to understand the relation of this information to the immediacy of the call I had received relative to my act of invocation that literally must have conjured her up from Mexico. A magical portal had just been opened for me, enabling me to visit vicariously some of the other worlds that Leonora Carrington had encountered in visions, trance, and ecstatic epiphanies. Our surreal meeting enabled me later to understand her novels and visual art, to enter her creative work into the herstory of the reemergence of the great goddess, whose pre-patriarchal civilization inspired so many feminist artists of the second wave. My entree to her world of marvels had just begun. The most outstanding mystery that evolved from this auspicious encounter was that the last line of her novel, The Hearing Trumpet, was, "If the old woman can't go to Lapland, then Lapland must come to the old woman." I noted the similarity of that utterance with my own words to the cosmos that inaugurated her arrival in my life. I had to ask her why Lapland was so important to her protagonist, Marion, and her reply was something that seemed to be obvious to Leonora. "Because, Gloria, the shamans of Lapland just happen to be the most magical people on earth." I treasured that sentence for years, and much later, in 1979, I received another important phone call. The shaman of Sámi land, we used to call it Lapland, had come to Los Angeles and wanted to stay with me. How had she heard of me? Why did she want to meet me? Was this related to Leonora's novel? Later, I learned it was Berit Os, a professor from Norway, who the shaman was accompanying on a fundraising trip, and they had traveled across the United States raising funds to create a feminist university in Norway. When they came to Los Angeles, the shaman insisted that they stay with me. As I learned several years later, the Sami had 8 goddesses whose names all ended in Aka, A-C-C-A, such as Yuksaka, Juksaka, Madaraka. These goddesses, tradition taught, used to meet for rituals in their own graves of academia with 2 C's. It began to make magical sense to me that the shaman of Sámiland had found me in my own grove of academia with 1 C. I'm convinced that the arrival of the shaman from Lapland, now called Sámiland, in my life was directly related to The Hearing Trumpet by Leonora Carrington. Had she known that this future encounter would transpire? These are some of the mysteries that I've continued to illuminate the magic tapestry of my life ever since I met her. Because we have a short time together, I'd like to introduce you to some things I learned from Leonora about the origin of her incredible spiritual power. And to give you a glimpse of some of these powers that are involved with her artwork and with her personal life, and also her desire to create a women's movement in Mexico. As an opening statement, I just want to convey how innocent I was when I met her. I did not know she was a visual artist. We never studied women artists in my course on surrealism, which lasted 2 semesters. There surely would have been time to include them. She visited with me in New York, and we met Betty Friedan because she dreamed also of creating a women's movement in Mexico. Betty Friedan was impressed with Leonora's art, and she gave her references of people to meet in Mexico. It was a good interaction. After a year apart from Leonora, I had been in Paris with my family. When we returned to the United States, I prepared for my first summer visit to Leonora in Mexico. She had written to me not to read anything about the anthropology, history, or archaeology relating to Mexico. I should come with an open mind. So I was seeing my very first pyramid when she had already prepared an activity for me. I was to go with her and the young driver she hired to take us to the pyramid of Teotihuacan. She told me to walk to the pyramid, see what it was originally built to be or what it was to serve on our planet. I had no background, nothing to relate to, but whenever she prodded me to come out with what I saw, I had a download of something to say, and I started to compare the pyramid to the science building of my university. She became ecstatic. Yes, yes, Gloria, go on. This is great. The science building, great. I was stunned. And whenever she spoke, something came to me. And I said, I thought maybe it would serve people from outer space to come and go or be a landing field for these visitors from other planets. I had never given any thought to space travel back then, and I was as amazed as she was. I realized that it was her presence, her energy, that sent simple ideas to me and that I shared with her, embarrassed by my lack of book knowledge about these pyramids. She was thrilled, and after talking about space travel a bit, she declared the activity time was over. We would go back home. I had no idea I'd be quizzed like I was. 1 week later, a second activity was planned for me, a trip to the pyramids at Tula. This was very special because there were several pyramids and they had men sculpted on the tops of the pyramids who had backpacks on their outfits, and they did seem like astronauts. It felt more familiar to me than the other pyramid at Teotihuacan, but I was wrong. Leonora told me to walk back and forth and not to miss the optical illusion because it is very important. I did the walking back and forth many times, and I did not see anything special. She was getting anxious to tell me about it, and so she said that in her opinion, I had missed out on the optical illusion. But it was not merely an optical illusion, it was more. It was rather intentional. She was almost certain that it commemorated a sacred site. She intuited that this site had once been inhabited by a race of superior beings, who, for some reason, had supplanted and subsequently disappeared from the face of the earth. He spoke excitedly about all the vanished knowledge that these races might have once possessed. In her mythic worldview, these vanished races had lived their spirit life in the underground or underworlds of our earth and our psyches, and that they can be accessed by altering our spiritual state of consciousness in a diversity of ways. This experience disclosed from the essential thematic core of Leonora's artistic vision, the vanishing of ancient worlds, possessing advanced esoteric knowledge, and of their disappearance into the underworld and the unconscious. These worlds have been conquered and banished from our current systems of knowledge. She believed that we must awaken from our insomnia through the ages, and that by our evolution, by a variety of practices, including sacred rituals, meditation, magical geometries, and more specifically, sacred meals using sacred herbs, I would also add to her rather long list that there was also fasting, as well as the practice of making visionary art. She was inspired by the Mayan codices, the Tibetan tankas, the Gnostic Gospels, ancient lunar calendars, runic writing, all symbolic maps and languages that indicate the path of the soul's evolution towards spiritual illumination. On another occasion, when we could share our secrets silently, she spoke to me more specifically about the origin of her powers. She said she had to speak of these things in other dimensions. She told me that she was born with the ability to see hypnagogic visions. Her grandmother also had this gift. She learned that she descended from a race that worshipped the triple-headed goddess, the original matriarchal religion. She went on to describe many of the strange experiences she has had since childhood. One of these was seeing mythic figures in her visions. Sometimes in her visions, when she was totally possessed, she would become very ill and weak. She had been analyzed by a doctor, and he had taken an encephalogram. It showed that she produced automatically the chemical of the reputed magic mushrooms. It would always take her a very long time to recover and start to paint again after one of these episodes. Also, in her non-material self, she would leave her body and travel in time and space. She would be lying down and catapulted out of herself. She would pass through doors, go into rooms, other ages, and meet many different people there. Since all those conversations and the excitement of thinking in broader dimensions about our lives on this planet being possibly in communication with other lives elsewhere in the universe, I have always wanted to find a practice that could train me in ways of attaining the ability to search in many dimensions. Unbeknown to me, the shaman of Sámi land, Ellen Merritt Gaup Dunfeld, daughter of Mikhail Gaup, the great shaman, appeared on another kind of call. Not a phone call this time, but a, quote, listening to the cosmic messages through the reindeer horn kind of call that the spirits had allowed Ellen Merritt to give me to enhance my ability to hear them. On another occasion, we had just returned from visiting the sacred Sámi site, and on the way back, I felt I was flying downhill, but not touching the ground. The shamans told me I would find out who the spirit guide was that took me up and down those 3 mountains. I had not seen anything I would call a spirit guide, and I did not understand how this could be proven to me. But they said I would dream about it, and indeed that night I did see the figure of a tall person dressed in reindeer skin clothes, but I couldn't distinguish the face of the person. I told this to Ellen Merritt, and she had us run right over to her father's house and spoke to him about my dream. He walked slowly but surely over to a photograph on the wall, took it down, and lo and behold, it was the exact image I had dreamed of. They told me that it was the father of Mikhail Gaup, the great shaman, and he was also a shaman ancestor in their lineage. The exact matching of the photo in their living room to my dream image was just about enough to convince me that the mysterious synchronicities could be accepted as a kind of proof when validated like this one was. Leonora also had a dream of starting a community in Mexico for artists and intellectuals, feminists in particular. And I found as I was preparing things for you, the notes I took some 50 years ago, or almost, emerged on a lined paper pad that I saved for when I would want to share them with people to whom it would mean something. It meant everything to me, and I wanted to live there. I will be writing this now from my notes. The house in Cuernavaca that she called lovingly the Wrath at Cow Horn was to be a woman's compound. Cow horn means the horn of the cow. It would have a central courtyard, a real Garden of Eden with flowers and plants for meals. There would be no furniture except the table and chairs for eating. Everyone would eat directly from the table with their hands, so you could avoid doing dishes. Then you would hose down all the debris through a hole in the middle of the table, and it would be tunneled down into the earth and a composting area below. She wanted the house to be circular. Everyone would have their own room with no furniture and no clutter. Beds would be built into a ledge, a sort of platform coming out from the wall. Everyone would sleep on these ledges on a mattress and blankets, and then put them away in the morning. The goal was to have no furniture anywhere and no housework. The community would be close to nature and spend time creatively instead of doing housekeeping. I like that. The other day, I came up with some other notes that I took at some point on her idea for a kind of convent. She wrote, the central feature of the convent will be a library, an occult library, with esoteric rituals, a library of transformation, a practical learning library to learn the mechanics of learning on a practical level, how to build, how to construct and invent. One would study the martial arts and the women would become very strong. They would study agriculture and would plant trees, a community of astronomers, veterinarians, and dancers. Daily karma cleaning would take place in the morning dream sessions at the breakfast table. A community scribe was always there to take down the dreams that would be the history of the community. Time for sleeping during the day and living at night to change habit patterns. Everything was to be reevaluated and redone. Elimination of useless clothing. full moon and new moon festivities. Main teachings, women's control over their own bodies. Esoteric teachings, the rising of the Kundalini. I will conclude by saying that through visual art and literature, Leonora has opened the portals for us to learn to navigate and expand our consciousness too, so that we may reach what André Breton, the founder of Surrealism, called le point suprême, the supreme point, where life and death and all other dualisms are no longer in opposition to each other. It would never have occurred to me back then that as a friend of Leonora Carrington, people in Italy and in Norway would have known that I was a link between her and the Sami. But she was the person who told me that the shamans of Lapland are the most magical people on earth. Gloria. I knew I had to take that seriously, even though I didn't know what it actually meant. Her teachings were always thrilling. I have many more stories, but in the end, I want to conclude. Leonora was the most awakened person I have ever known, and it was truly the greatest gift I had ever received to have been her friend for so many years. For Leonora, art is part of all creation. In her vision of her kind of animism, art has spirit and agency. And in Carrington's visual art, and particularly her novel, The Hearing Trumpet, a work of art seems to have winked at me just the way the portrait of the abbess in the picture on the wall in Lightsome Hall winked at her book's protagonist, Marion, in The Hearing Trumpet. Leonora has performed a great work of alchemy in her lifetime. She has transmuted, and overturned patriarchal categories in which women were seen to be inferior, and has introduced a grandiose cosmic vision in which women are like alchemists, as their lives undergo myriad transformations until the entirety of their revelations and epiphanies lead to the knowledge of regeneration and possibly the healing of the planet too, all guiding them to their moment of enlightenment. Once a woman's consciousness undergoes a spiritual evolution, she would say, the power of the new Eve, a newborn Eve, will arise, and the great alchemical work of repairing the world will be underway. Now I feel that a work of art has winked at me too. However we interpret the magical events I have lived through, I am just grateful for the generosity of Leonora's time, the books, the adventures, the teachings, the warmth of her friendship and humor. I will always miss her presence in my world, but her job remains incomplete, I think, until the word about her art, her thoughts, and her creations is spread far enough to be transmitted to new generations who recognize how important her message to us has been. Knowing very little about these things in any official kind of way, I can only speculate that Leonora's lifelong work is hardly over, and that with the 2 new museums she already has dedicated to her work near the end of her life, her final sculptures also speak to me of the ultimate journey we must all take to the other world, and how we must carefully prepare for it by inviting those souls to accompany us who have, as we have, heard the varied calls made to each of us to awaken as Leonora did. It may just be an optical illusion to many of you, but maybe it is the call for you. So I would sign off with her words of wisdom. Wake up, listen for the call to create a new and better world now. She seemed to have faith in my ability to enter her world and make new separate discoveries. I had no idea about any of this then. You are all live witnesses to the way this Biennale is spreading the news of her accomplishment in the arts. And there are the other women of surrealism in this Biennale who were as omitted as she was long ago and are now being studied as they should have been so many years ago. It seems impossible, but surrealism, as I studied it and learned it from the original surrealist women, whose artistic destiny led me to see that they believed it, that it came to pass for them here at the Biennale. May your journeys be your portal to the awakening from the millennia of insomnia we have been in for so long. Leonora's basic teaching was, remember this, the earth is a heavenly body. Everything on earth is alive and sacred. Special thanks go to the creators of this year's Venice Biennale for their awakening and reception of the call to transmit the teachings of Leonora and the Sami, the most magical people on earth. You can anticipate that just because your dreams seem to be impossible at the moment, It doesn't mean they will not defy your expectations and enter your lives. As Leonora wrote in The Stone Door, another of her novels, one day this book will enter life. I wish you all a marvelous journey to that supreme point, and maybe we will intuit it as our new promised land. It was so much longer. It feels like I'll finish it in a minute.
Hello, and thank you so much for the invitation. Leonora Carrington's novel, The Hearing Trumpet, was published in French in 1974, and shortly after in English, but the novel was written much earlier, probably in the end of the 50s. This knowledge makes it even more prophetic, since the hippie movement in many ways are present in the novel, though it's not a youth movement, but a movement of old crones breaking out of a dehumanizing old people's home and going on a wild grail search. Carrington was subverting and rewriting myth many years before fellow feminist writers like Kathy Acker and Angela Carter. Both grails and arcs are present in the fabulous manic finale of The Hearing Trumpet, where Earth itself is rebelling against exploitation and patriarchal oppression. While the poles are changing and the old hierarchies are subverted, the 94-year-old protagonist, Marianne Leatherby, and her fellow crones form an underground cross-species commune to assist Earth into a new holistic world order. Although all through this, Marianne is obsessed with the idea of Samiland as some kind of magic utopia. She is inspired by Hans Christian Andersen's fairy tale, The Snow Queen from 1844, where the Snow Queen lives in Finnmark and the little girl Gerda goes to look for her soulmate, the boy Kai, who is under the evil spell of the Snow Queen. On the way, she is guided by various wise Sami women. When the poles are shifting, Marianne actually gets to go to Samiland, but Samiland comes to her rather than the other way around. In the new ice age after the eco-disaster, Marianne is keeping a record of the changes, and I quote from the novel. After I die, Annabeth's werecups will continue to document the planet. Excuse me, one more time. After I die, Annabeth's werecups will continue the document till the planet is peopled with cats, werewolves, bees and goats. We fervently hope that this will be an improvement on humanity, which deliberately renounced the pneuma of the goddess. End of quote. The notion of the queer interspecies communities that are going to take over the world is being repeated several times throughout the book in different versions. We hear about Marianne, and I quote, her army of bees, wolves, 6 old women, a postman, a Chinaman, a poet, an atom-driven ark, and a werewoman. And even earlier we hear of Marianne's life with a cynical son, where she lives a precarious life, and I quote, in the backyard which I share with my 2 cats, a hen, the maid, and her 2 children, some flies, and a cactus plant called Morgie. End of quote. In the end of the book, not only the poles are shifting, but also the hierarchies between men, women, animals, plants, and objects. Like in Carrington's art, where animals and objects like furniture have surprising features like human hands and feet. Gloria Orenstein met Leonora in 1971, and later she comes to understand that she lives her life in extension of The Hearing Trumpet, like it was a sequel to the novel. Through her friendship with the Sami shaman Ellen Marit Gaup Dunfeld, she gets to actually go to Samiland that which was the fictional character Marian Leatherby's deepest wish. It is truly the story of art's transformative powers. Ellen Marit was visiting California as a secretary of the Norwegian politician Berit Aas on a founding trip in support of an ecofeminist research center. And later on, Gloria goes to Alta in Finnmark and shares some interesting shamanistic experiences in what turns out to be some of the last years of Ellen Marit's life. She died in 91. Gloria became the sorcerer's apprentice once again, like she was in relation to Leonora. Other great artists, like the Chilean filmmaker Alessandro Jodorowsky, came before her. Jodorowsky's account of being the apprentice of Carrington in Mexico City can be read in his autobiographical book, Spiritual Journey from 2005. Jodorowsky credited Carrington as great inspiration behind the surreal universes he created in his movies. Among other things, Ellen Marit was a well-known activist in the Alta Rebellion in the 70s and all through the 80s, where eco-activists together with Sami people fought the government plans of a dam project that would put the village of Masi underwater. In 1981, Ellen Marit led a group of Sami women to occupy the Norwegian Minister of State Gro Harlem Brundtland's office for 19 hours while Sami people were on hunger strike in a tent or a lavoro outside. In the end, they won the fight, and later these events led to the foundation of the Sami parliament. Ellen Marit is an early example of magic resistance that, for instance, has been rising to battle ex-President Donald Trump. Maybe you know the Facebook group called Bind Trump, and supports indigenous struggles around the world against corporate exploitation of the resources of the earth. The folklorist Ellen Gullveig Alver interviewed Ellen Marit in Bergen in her final days and writes about Ellen Marit and her father, the great shaman Mikkel Gaup, in their strive for authenticity. They identified themselves in opposition to the so-called neo-shamanism. This is in the 80s, where the New Age movement presented a new type of postmodern belief system where you could put together your own conglomerate of different religions and various types of mysticism. Pretty much what Carrington did long before the 80s. In Alver's account, the rather strict old school shamanism of Ellen Marit's father was in opposition to Orenstein and her ecofeminist goddess movement. Ellen Marit was critical of the goddess movement, but in the end she seemed to have found it rather liberating because of the female-centric uplifting aspects that were perhaps less present in her upbringing, where she was taught to keep her distance to the fake shamans, the modern people. In her legendary text from 1985, the Cyborg Manifesto, Donna Haraway concludes, "I'd rather be a cyborg than a goddess." And that's what we all repeated in my time at the University of Bergen in the first years of the new millennium. The far-out essentialism of goddess feminism was to frown upon compared to the cool constructivist cyborg feminism. Today, academia, at least in Scandinavia, is intensely occupied by the history of witch persecution, ideas of magic, and the occult. Pop culture is populated by goddesses like Beyoncé, inspired by Afrofuturism and the Black Power movement, though also by futuristic cyborgs like Grimes. Would you rather be a cyborg than a goddess? I'm not so sure anymore. At the opening ceremony of the Sami Pavilion in April, the artist Paulina Fedorov made her elders ask the spirits for permission to set foot on this land. She and her elders stood silent for a moment, and she was granted permission. The respect of the limited resources of the earth seems so appropriate today, by way of a kind of strategic essentialism we could learn from the indigenous peoples and view the earth as a powerful goddess that we need to respect. To rewild the world and rewild the imagination seemed to be a wise slogan for 2022. It is no coincidence that we find the Sami artists Ove Gaub and Britta Marakatlapa in the Black celebration of the Arsenale part of Milk of Dreams, opening with the fabulous works by Simon Lee and Belkis Ayan. With the ceramic hybrid creatures of Gabriel Shale and the wonderful soil and spice-smelling garden-like installations of Delcy Morelos and Precious Okoyomon, it makes sense to include the works of art relating to the Sami struggle for keeping their nomadic reindeer herding lifestyle safe from cynical capitalist exploitation. Go directly to the Peggy Guggenheim. Oh, is that my job? I know, I don't know. Go directly to Peggy Guggenheim's collection to take in paintings like Leonora Fini's wonderful Catonian deity watching over the sleep of a young man from 1946, where a black female sphinx guards a slender young man who may be transforming while he is sleeping. His pubic hairs are visible, but a silk sheet covers his sex. He seems to be somehow transitioning. In ancient Greece, Catonian deities were actually goddesses of agriculture. Once again, like we see so many times in the Milk of Dreams exhibition, the conversation between artists across generations are live and kicking. Leonora's goddess was probably white, like Hans Christian Andersen's Evil Snow Queen. Her great inspiration came from the White Goddess, a historical grammar of poetic myth, the book from 1948 by Robert Graves. If you see white animals in her paintings, and there are a lot of those, they are probably the White Goddess in disguise. The White Goddess is probably not a Caucasian lady with a British accent. Rather, I imagine one of Fini's sphinxes with bright radiance around her that any true goddess should have. Leonora's surrealism was always indigenous, if you understand the Gaelic people as more originally attached to the earth than to the centrally controlled British institutions. Leonora's pictorial universe was heavily influenced by the Gaelic folk tales from her childhood. When she came to Mexico, she discovered similarities between the Mayan mythical world and the Gaelic. The Catholic girls' schools that threw her out and the snobbish upper class that her father represented is central to her rebellion. The Spanish conquistadors brought Catholicism to Latin America, while almost killing off the Mayan culture. No doubt in my mind which side Leonora was on. Like you saw before, behind Gloria, you could catch a glimpse of Carrington's gigantic mural from 1964, El Mundo Mágico de los Mayas, the magic world of the Mayans. I'm one of quite a few writers and artists who traveled to Mexico in Leonora's footsteps. My book, Leonora's Journey, came out in Norwegian in 2019, a project I started working on in 2016. At that time, I thought I was writing about an almost unknown artist, and I'm so happy that things have changed so radically since then. Thanks.
Yes, thank you so much, Susanne, for this introduction here. And I thought we could start to have conversation on surrealism. It is a very interesting phenomenon, both in shamanistic thinking and in art theory. So I wanted to invite you, Gloria, to reflect upon the potentialities in surrealism that could be useful and fruitful to the challenges that our world is facing now.
Yeah. You know, I was looking over my two, because I have another section also on this, on what I did with Ellen Merritt when I was in Samiland, but I took a lot of things out because it was it seemed to be too long a presentation. Anyway, last night, somehow I was looking at the two sides, the Sami and Leonora, and I was never sure that Leonora had met the Sami, but she certainly knew a lot about them and read about them and really revered their magical side. And so what I started to see that I liked about the way the two related was that they were both really always focused on and putting forward the notion that we can work on ourselves in order to expand our consciousness and in order to make contact with those from other parts of the cosmos and of the universe. And I thought suddenly that, you know, there's so much in common that they have, and I probably wouldn't have noticed it if we hadn't set it up as a discussion point. But it seems to me that, in fact, what Suzanne also said is very true about Leonora, that, you know, she went her own way and went through, in some sense, the entry challenges that her time in history and her and her own path had brought forth for her, some very difficult. And then what's happened here in you know, in the Biennale, it's extraordinary. The people that I knew when I first met her would hardly have ever imagined such a thing. And then I came to discover that another thing they have in common, the Sami and Leonora, is their encounter, and when we're with them, we see it go on, their encounter with other species, communicating with other species, as well as their encounter with the width of the cosmos and the universe. Then I realized that, you know, we've always said that we don't use more of our brains in America or in the West, and they do. And so, whereas I would see something as having some sort of connotation for me, maybe scary, maybe this or that, for them, everything takes its place in the larger cosmos, and they see it from another perspective, both of them. And I had that happen a lot, especially when I was in Samiland. And I think that she's able to see things that people have in common or different. Like I'd ride on it, this is just banal, but I'd ride on a bus with her in New York, and she'd say, "See that man over there? And he looks just like John F. Kennedy. Look at him, look at him." And he did. You know, she sort of course, nobody else in the bus would notice this, but she had a way of putting together what she saw and relating it to a myth, to a reality, to a new transformed definition of what we're living in the midst of. And I think that I'm re-stimulated now, having gone through all this right now, that I really want to get back to what I was experiencing as a very big novice and very elementary when I was with Ellen Merritt and up in Samiland, because we did little exercises that, you know, had meaning. She's had us one time, a group of friends just lie on the ground, and she sort of put us into a trance. And then afterwards, she came around and tapped each one and asked us to say what we saw or what we heard. And I said, you know, I don't think I saw anything or heard anything, but this thing was in my head, and it said, from Tita, from Tita, from Tita. And I didn't think that was a word, but actually, it turns out it meant future. And, you know, it was like astounding. We all looked at each other, really? And I began to think, well, there's maybe more things waiting for me in the future, you know, that I can look forward to that are on this level. And the more I think of it, the more I think that the lives that the Sami live and that Leonora lived have many, many points of contact that we have eliminated, as I said somewhere in what I wrote, that it's been eliminated from our definition of knowledge. It's looked upon as some sort of ridiculous hallucination and meaning nothing. And whereas these other cultures that take what they see to be real rather than fiction, and to go with it and sort of explore its meaning, that this is what they have in common, that they can offer us the opportunity to learn so much more by encountering people who really do communicate with the beyond.
Thank you. Thank you so much for these reflections. I wanted to turn to Susanne and focus a little bit on the Snow Queen, this amazing story. I have personally been thinking that, and I suspect, for example, Thomas Kuhn, for that he has just rewritten the Snow Queen, where you have the image of the world that is broken into very many small pieces, and these pieces go into the eyes of people, and then we have the journey of Kai and Gerda, who want to get out this thing in the eye. So could you please enlighten us a little bit on your relationship to the story about Snow Queen?
Well, of course, Hans Christian Andersen, like most children in the whole world, these stories were part of my upbringing. Good night stories. The Snow Queen was never my favorite, so I didn't go very far in analyzing it, but I was amazed about the exact knowledge of Finnmark. I mean, I know that Hans Christian Andersen was traveling by coach all over Europe, and although this was a time with hardly any cars and, well, probably trains, I'm not sure, but so he seems to have very exact knowledge of Finnmark, and he mentions a few places up there, up way in the north. So what I would really like to know is, did he go there ever? I don't know that, but it's a lovely story of two children's friendship, Gerda and Kai. And Kai is, of course, under the influence of the evil Snow Queen. It's pretty much the same story of the other evil Snow Queen in Lewis Carroll's Narnia stories. So Gerda goes to save Kai from this kind of catatonic, he's sitting by a lake trying to figure out some riddle, and her innocent heart is kind of melting the spell he's under. So it's a lovely story, but I'm also interested in the very exact, the way Gerda meets different people and the way that guides her. And those are Sami people. So it's an open question to me if Andersen ever went up north. I hope he did, but I don't know.
Yeah, Yeah, I have often been thinking about the Snow Queen, because somehow it is a very good story when it comes to the journey of Kai and Gerda, but it's also at the same time it has some misogynic dimensions, like how cold and cruel the queen is. And I have been so curious about Hans Christian Andersen's relationship to women.
Yes.
Because in other aspects, so in other stages of that story, then there are some old wise women whom Kai and Gerda visits and gets advices on.
Yeah.
So I would invite.
He certainly didn't have an easy relationship with women, as far as I know, but I'm not a specialist of Andersen's work, though.
Yeah, I know none of us are specialists on Andersen's works, but since Andersen is somehow a nexus that we have all heard his fairy tales, so and I thought that our forum here is not for specialists, but for creative reflections. So I would also. What would your reflections on this be, Gloria? I understand that you also know somewhat about the Snow Queen.
I don't actually know about the Snow Queen, to enlighten this discussion, but I would say that whenever I went, when I went traveling with Ellen Merritt, she would dress in, she looked like a Snow Queen. I used to say, you look just like the Snow Queen. And I had a real contact with the story, but it was, I don't know what to say. It was royal looking, it was real. And it was extremely effective when she was appearing in public.
And she was a public figure. She was on television too, and in TV shows.
Yeah, I just wanted to add to the part where we were talking about when she took the women from the reindeer ranches who were in their 80s and even maybe 90s, and then she went to the parliament, and then she put them to sleep for the whole night, and she asked them. At first, I didn't understand what she was doing, because, as they called me, the white Western woman, I was like not always touching base with that level, but I intended to get there. Anyway, she would ask them what they dreamed, and apparently they all dreamed together, like a communal dream of going to the United Nations, and they all dreamed of going to see the Pope. So first the Pope and then the United Nations. But what impressed me was how, no one in America would think to find out where we should take our trip next by putting us to sleep or in a trance. It would just be like completely opposed to any kind of sense, and it would be seen as ridiculous. But actually, it was deeper and more appropriate that what she did, how it had a good outcome in the end. And I think, we have to make more practical use even of our extrasensory perceptions too, because without practicing them, we have no familiarity with those worlds, and we really could profit a lot by making friends out in the vast universe one day.
Yeah, 13th of August this year, the little village Sirma, where I come from, Sirma. It's a little tiny village on the border between Norway and Finland in Sámi land. And we had a seminar there 50 years ago. Ellen-Marit Gaup-Dunfjell was very central in that seminar. She was this was about launching Sámi literature. Writing Sámi poems, using our language as a literary language, and so on. and we got the movement Che SV. She was very instrumental to get that, because it was a kind of show Sami pride. Be proud of your culture. So she was very instrumental both in practical organizational work. One of the 7 Sami who were in the hunger strike outside the Norwegian Parliament in 1979. One of them was my brother, and one of them was my cousin, Jorunn Eikjok. And 2 of the hunger strikers were Elemaret brothers. So we were in very close cooperation those days when we were administering that. And that was to open a new space for the political discourse on the Sami issues in Norway. But as I see the clock now, I understand that we are going to screen now Gloria's call will be screened now, and then we will continue our conversation right after that.
Mm-hmm. My professors would teach us about how the great poets and writers were called by the muse, and they had to answer the call. And I used to sit there and think, well, no one's ever going to call me, a mother of 2 on the Upper West Side. My story all began when I was a graduate student at NYU, writing my dissertation on surrealism in France and Latin America after World War II. There was nothing on the subject of surrealism in Latin America in the New York Public Library or in the NYU Library. There was just nothing in those days. The women had been written out of the whole artistic canon. So I wrote a letter to Leonora Carrington, the woman of surrealism in Mexico City. She said, look, I am not interested in academics. I want to know why the women in New York are burning their bras. And we started to correspond, in fact, every day. She said, well, I've been forgotten, I've been shelved. All the men have something, there's nothing on me. She said, you have to come to Mexico if you want to find out about me. I couldn't go to Mexico. I had 2 children, I had a husband. There were very funny letters and postcards, a manuscript of her novel called The Hearing Trumpet, a picture of a pyramid, and she would say, I live under here. Then I thought, maybe this is some sort of surrealist little turn or twist. And then she started to send me reproductions of her paintings. When I saw her art, I went into trembling and I thought, I know this world, I know this world. I don't know what it means, but it's something really alive for me. I went to Greenwich Village, I bought this little Mexican dress, I put it on, and on July 6, 1971, I sat at my kitchen table, which was my desk, and I addressed the universe. And I said, if I can't go to Mexico, let Mexico come to me. At that moment, the phone rang, and this great English accent said, this is Leonora Carrington. I have just arrived from Mexico, and I would like to meet you. I was shaken to the core. I said to her, I know you're not going to believe this. She said, of course I believe it, Gloria. I'm a witch. Okay. So I made an appointment to meet her at the Chelsea Hotel, and I wore the little Mexican dress. She greeted me with her hands making a sign of the horns of the moon. She said, those are the holy horns of consecration. Consecration of what? And she said, of the goddess. And it went through me like electric voltage. And I had only heard of goddesses. I had never heard of the goddess. She said, now, I want you to go with me to France. We met with her friend named Henri Parizeau, and we sat at lunch, and she said to him, Henri, tell me about your wife. And he said, oh, she's so wonderful. She's a pure woman child. She's a femme enfant. So Leonora said, tell me what you mean by a woman child. So he said, oh, she can't even buy her own metro ticket. She can't even make a phone call by herself. She needs me to help her all the time. Isn't that wonderful? And Leonora put her hands on her hips and she stood up and she said, I've heard quite enough, Henri. Gloria, I'm going to my hotel. I am going to have a stiff drink and I'll come out in 4 days. And she stomped out. I said, do you realize how humiliating it is to be called a woman child when you're in your 50s? And why would you want a woman child? And then I went back to France for a year. What I did was interview other women of surrealism. And it turns out that they were waiting for me. The first one that I went to visit was Leonora Fini, who is a wonderful, wonderful artist. She was older by then, no woman child. And she lived with a lot of young men, had a lot of cats. Cats for her were on the highest rung of all creatures on earth. She was sitting in a chaise lounge wearing a robe that was closed at the top. She was wearing a big wig. And the men then started to ply me with champagne, and the other hand was filled with books on Leonora Fini. And then she swung around. The big robe that she was wearing opened up, and she was like completely nude in front of me. Here was the champagne shaking, 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 and there were the books falling on the floor. And I think that they realized that they had succeeded in their little skit to get a rise out of the naive little American who thought she was studying surrealism and hadn't had a clue what surrealism was really like. I did speak to Leonora Carrington about it, and she said, Gloria, you should have been so complimented. They went to all this trouble to set this up just for you. I had published some of my research in the Feminist Art Journal in 1973. The main point of that article was to make the contrast between the way women were depicted by men and the way women were depicted by these women artists. It seemed to me that the women were portraying women not as sex objects, not even surrealist sex objects. They were portraying women as visionaries, questers, guides, mediums, artists, and they also represented the great mother goddess. The woman was the subject, not the object. The next person that I met with was Merit Oppenheim. And she said, what you wrote about the woman child is so correct. And then she began to tell me her story, that when she was young and Man Ray was taking pictures of her in the nude and she was the darling of the surrealists, when she turned 30, the men stopped sitting with her at the cafe and she got very depressed and she burned all her work. Then she went into therapy. After maybe a year or so, she did have a big dream, a revelatory dream. She saw a rabbit running through a landscape that formerly had always been barren. She knew that the rabbit symbolized fertility. She was reemerging as an artist now with her own autonomy. She said, Gloria, it's so important what you've written about the woman child, that they would think that at the age of 30 you have nothing to contribute as an artist. It's so insulting, and it almost ruined my artistic career. had been walking along a street in Paris, and I saw a painting in the window of the gallery. There was this body of a woman, but it was transparent so you could see through it. She was nothing. She was just air. They said it was by Jane Graverol, you should go to visit her. She used to be known as the female Magritte. I made a date to see her with her husband, the famous psychiatrist specializing in art of the insane. Something had happened and she was not well. You couldn't understand what she was saying. She couldn't move her muscles in her mouth. But she got more and more agitated. She kept pointing upstairs. And her husband said, "You must not listen to her. She's not making any sense at all." We went upstairs into her studio, and there we saw this painting of a tiger in a cage with bars going right through its body. And then she got really agitated, and she was like screaming and wanted to tell me about this painting. And he pulled me by the arm and took me out of there. He said, "This is nonsense. Don't pay any attention to her." And I figured out that she was trying to tell me that she felt exactly like that animal, a strong one, that had bars going through in her encagement, that she was suffering a lot. I had planned to go to see Leonora Carrington in Mexico, my first trip to Mexico. We went to Teotihuacan outside of Mexico City, the pyramids of the sun and the moon. I thought all of this information that was possessed by ancient civilizations is now buried underground, either in our subconscious or unconscious. Her idea for women then was that women will seek a consciousness raising that is an interior experience that will lead to illumination, and through this illumination, women will save the planet from the destruction that we have wrought upon it. She was very, very much a precursor of ecofeminism. And she wanted to build a house in Cuernavaca. She said she was making a women's community. The garden would be the central place where everybody would meet, and it would only have artists and writers and intellectuals. There would be no furniture in this house, because this was not a house for housewives. There would be just a great big dining room table in the middle of the Garden of Eden, and then it would have a hole in the center. After we ate, all the food would be washed through the hole, absorbed by the earth. No housework, nothing. And back to the creative work. She was going to call it the House at Cow Horn. Cuernavaca means horn of a cow. I said, I definitely want to be in that community. Now, I had just about integrated the idea into my being that I had been called by Leonora Carrington. I didn't expect that there would be another call, but there was. It was 1987, and I was putting on a conference on ecofeminism. I was sitting in the office doing some work, and the phone rang. It turned out that it was a shaman from Lapland. The shaman informed me, "The Great Spirit has called you, and you must come to Sami land," which is the real name for Lapland, "and we must walk 25 miles in nature and then climb 3 mountains and meet the Great Spirit." Okay. Now, sacred site in Sami land consists of a huge standing rock. Near it is a great big open gaping hole into the earth, into which you throw offerings to the spirits. She said, "Well, did you see me speak to the spirits?" I asked them if I could give you a reindeer bone and you would sleep with it under your pillow tonight. Middle of the night. Oh my God, I woke up and these voices started howling at me. Gloria, Gloria, Gloria. And so I learned that the spirits communicate with you. When you're accompanied by the invisible intelligences, you can achieve anything like climb 3 mountains. When I read Leonora Carrington's novel, The Hearing Trumpet, back in the early 70s, the last line of that novel says, if the old woman can't go to Lapland, then Lapland must come to the old woman, which was almost like the sentence I had said, if I can't go to Mexico, then Mexico must come to me. Why did the woman in an old age home who was 92 years old, throughout the whole novel, she wanted to go to Lapland? So I asked Leonora, because the shamans of Lapland happen to be the most magical people on earth, Gloria. I'm wondering if I did take the fictional character called Marion from the hearing trumpet to Lapland with me, because I think that the bone that I put under my pillow became my hearing trumpet, through which I heard the voices from the other world. When Leonora died, I called her up and her voice was like as if it was coming from inside the earth. It was so deep. And, you know, I told her that she was so magical and I loved her and it was a wonderful experience to know her. I came to understand the cosmic, multidimensional vision of Leonora Carrington in her art. The shaman informed me they have 7 goddesses in their culture, and all their names end in A-C-C-A, Aka. And when they used to meet to have ceremonies in nature, they were meeting in academia. And they came for me in my academia with 1 C, and I met them in their 2 Cs, academia. So I thought that was just perfect. Where else to look for me but in academia? I realized that I had a call, and I answered it, and I was thrilled. It was so magical a journey. With that, I conclude my presentation.
Yeah, that was a wonderful story about Leonora Carrington. And I thought that if we, Susanne, you wrote a book with your story. So what would you, if you are invited to present some thoughts about your story on Leonora Carrington?
Well, I got to know her through a short movie about the female surrealists made by a Norwegian artist called Anne Kjersti Bjørn, Ung, vakker og begavet, Gifted Beauties. And I thought it was like a funny animation, and it is, but it's kind of mixed media, so all of a sudden there was some documentary clips from an interview with Leonora in her kitchen in Mexico City. And I was just so shocked with her presence, with her white face and her dark eyes. And I got really curious about her and about her art. So the strange thing happened many years later when I was in 2016 applying for a grant, and Leonora kind of popped up again. And like I said in my talk, that at this time I thought I was doing a good job trying to shed some light on an unknown artist. So I went on my own journey in Leonora's footsteps. I got some really nice help in New York by Susan Aberth that we are going to present here at the seminar too. She gave me all her contacts. I went to Mexico City during Day of the Dead, and I thought everybody would be there, but nobody was there. So they were like, no, we don't want to be in the city with all the noise. So I was unlucky with my interviews most of the time. So, and then I went to Los Angeles and I met Gloria, the wonderful Gloria. And I made a long interview with her, and I just ended up not making it an interview, just giving her the stage. So she's ending my book with a long story. She's an amazing storyteller. So so I feel like I'm still traveling with Leonora. This has been a great trip, and it's brought me to Venice too. So it's magical.
Yeah, thank you. Have you had any interesting serendipities happening when you were working with the book?
What is that? Coincidence?
Yes.
Or? Yes. This is an essay. So I bring in, I'm doing my proper job as a monographer. I write about Leonora like a good scholar. But then it's a very free-form essay when I come to present, write about the actual journey. So I bring in, I was actually thinking about the surreal, the idea of magic coincidence. So walking around in New York, I met different people, and very strange things seem to happen in the good old manner, like Gloria is talking about. And I put, I make some different funny things happening. For instance, I didn't want to travel back in time to visit Leonora, and I wanted to bring her alive in the current time with the current crisis. So it's also a book about the precariousness of the cultural workers, my friends and my colleagues, and it's a story about the eco-crisis. So it's, for instance, talking about Donna Haraway, I bring Leonora into a conversation with Donna Haraway. It was really funny how much energy it generated when I was making the Leonora voice all of a sudden in the book. So, but I'm not sure how much time we have. Maybe we should also ask if there are any questions.
Yes, we will do that. I just thought that I should steal some minutes on the book here. Yes. Yeah. So we have the floor is open. So if any of the audience wants to come up with questions and comments and so on. Yeah.
Hello. Thank you so, so much for this inspiring talk and conversation to all of you. I would like to hear a bit more about you, and then what do you think about all these serendipities and connections that happen between Gloria, Leonora, and Sámi, because you are Sámi and they all speak about Sámi spirituality and shamanism, and I would like to hear your take on all of this and to understand what is this about.
Yeah, we have words for this serendipities. We call it deda, and that is that if you get a serendipity that is meaningful. I have been working with that, because with deda it works if you trust on that, and if you relax with that. One example in my own life is that I'm traveling from Bergen and I'm supposed to go home to Tromsø, and the connection is decent, so I have my suitcase. I have to take my suitcase out in Oslo. I fly from Bergen to Oslo, have to take my suitcase from Oslo. And then my suitcase doesn't come. And all the others, their suitcases come, and then my flight becomes tighter and tighter. It's a stressful situation. And I'm waiting for my suitcase there, and finally it comes, but then the connection with the flight is too tight, so I will end up being in Oslo that night. It's the latest plane. But living this life that I'm taught to live, it is rather than becoming very irritated on that suitcase that hasn't, what has the air company messed up with here. So then I take that as a deed, and I then ask myself, well, who am I to meet today? And I they give me a voucher so that I can stay at night, during that night in a hotel at the airport. But then I work at the law faculty, so I have a lot of former students, and then I walk into a former student of mine who is drinking coffee there. And he says, how wonderful, Ante, that you came, because I have felt a need to talk with you. So this was wonderful. And I then say to him that, I'm coming for that conversation, and I don't even mention the voucher that I got from the air company, because then me and my former student, we travel to his place, and he has a very substantial discussion. He is pondering on some questions in legal philosophy, and wondering what career steps he would need to consider, and we have a conversation that lasts for my plane goes like 7 in the next morning, so we talk through this night. So then I hop on the train to the airport at 5 o'clock, and then I go there. So that is an example of this to work the dida system, like now when I had some trouble finding this location. So also then I'm when many things happen in a strange way, when I get that experience, then I, rather than getting stressed, then I always ask, what is this? What am I going to get to know now, and who wants to talk with me, and where shall I go? What beautiful thing shall I now see, or something like that? So that is how I live my life in a contemporary world, but with these old values of dida, and when I like travel, then I know that I'm not alone. I always travel with three spirits, and so I always used to when I say goodbye to people in Sami, like mai ainalat, no, I always say mi ainalat, because I include my three spirits in the conversation. So I say that we all will see each other, and I also used to recognize, like yesterday when the taxi boat should pick me up at the airport. So he said, "So are you alone?" And I said, "No, I'm not alone. It's me and my three spirits here. So we are we are going to." And some people take that as a joke, and other people take that seriously. But that's oftentimes how a conversation works, that for some people things can be jokes and other things can be more of a serious nature. So that's how I sort of practice this Sami spiritual way in my everyday life, and I can guarantee it's a lot of fun.
Gloria?
Yeah, Gloria.
Can you hear me? I'm not sure if I'm on. Anyway, I wanted to tell really what I think is an extraordinary synchronicity that happened to me in Sami land, and I still practically can't get it through my head. It's so shocking. But there's just in Alta, where Ellen Merritt lives, in the town, there's maybe just one street with a few stores, and there's a place where you can go and get some coffee and donuts, and then there's some other little stores to get some food, and that's it. Anyway, I used to go there because I was missing stores since I was in the country all the time at her house, and I would go there and see what's new. And this day I went in to have some coffee, and there were these teenagers. They looked like they graduated from college, and they were American. They were speaking English. So I went up to them and I said, "Oh, it's nice to meet you. And I'm here, and I'm also American. And where are you from?" They say, "Oh, we're from USC." Now, USC is where I was teaching, the University of Southern California. I thought, that's already a big coincidence. Well, what is this? Then I said, "Oh, well, what are your plans and where are you going?" And well, we just finished a special program on helping poor people in poor neighborhoods, and we're moving to New York City, and we're going to be living in New York City for a year, starting at these new jobs. So I said, "Oh, where are you going to be living?" And they said, "We're living at 711 Amsterdam Avenue." Whoa, well, that's where I live. So then I said, "Well, what apartment are you going to be in then?" And they said they're going to be in apartment 12G. That's my apartment. And, like I was spooked out. I couldn't figure it out, except my daughter, who was living there, she was doing studies in Holland for her PhD. So she wasn't home and she sublet the apartment. I didn't even know that she did. But these people, they were living in our apartment. And how rare is that to find all that go on the top of a mountain in the Arctic Circle? It just like was mind-boggling. I couldn't figure out how it happened. So I just wanted to share it because the people pop out all over the place, and there's always a story involved.
Yeah, that's a wonderful example. I used to rely so much on data. Like we were, I was at a PhD course in Lund, and I should stay in Oslo for a couple of days, and I had not informed the person whom I was supposed to stay with. So, and my colleagues at the PhD course, they said that, so where are you going to stay? I'm going to stay at Trond's place. So Trond is in town. Yeah, I say Trond doesn't know it right now, but he'll know it soon. And as we land to the Oslo airport, who is sitting there? There is Trond sitting, and I say to Trond that, how nice that you are sitting there, because I just told these colleagues that I'm going to stay at your place, and that you don't know it yet, but now you know. So it is this energy that is important, and that energy doesn't come only with people. It can also come with animals, and it can come with flies. So and that was why I yoiked the mosquito at the beginning, because I have been so thrilled by the sound of a mosquito. I think that it's the most beautiful sound that I can hear. And I know that this is a little piece of music that I have to pay for. The cost is 1 drop of blood and a little bit of pain. But I think that it's so beautiful and sort of beyond reality. So I used to take that cost for the mosquito, and this beauty somehow transforms into me. So I think it's a very good deal for me as well. So now I haven't met any mosquitoes yet this summer, but I'm looking a little bit forward to that.
Do we still have a little time? I would like to ask you about the yoik, if I can ask you a question. I've heard that that the yoik is not to understand like a song about something. It's more of a calling to pokala. You're calling something and you're manifesting something.
Yeah, it is an interesting thing about the how does a yoik reference something? Yeah. And a song references something by the fact that a song is about something. But yoik references in a different way, that it sort of replicates that. So I saw some term once that was called iconization, that the yoik becomes an icon of what it references. So, but what have been very interesting for me with yoiks is that I live a life where new yoiks they come to me, and I'm not sure if a yoik is a being or what it is, but it can be that it comes to me and sings into my yoiks into my ear, and then we have a negotiation whether do you fit my voice, and if I find out that you fit my voice and we can be a good company together, then we can work together. And one example of a yoik that came to me in that fashion is a yoik. It came together with a poem, and that poem fits very well with Elemaret. It says, the poem says that in a dark world, we need stars so that people who have lost their way again can find home. In a gray world, we need colors so that people who have lost their joy again can find it. We yoik the star girl. We yoik her with intensity, with strength, with affection. In a silenced world, we need tones so that people who have lost their songs again can find them. And it goes like this. I can take it with this one. Nasten niitä joikkaleimet, kirehkäi nuujo särradijo. Teio lo 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 lo. Säynes maailmasta passanasti, vai lahpon olomo teiveroktot. Teio no 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 Nasten heitä joikkaleimet, uikirteimme hailideimet, japsadeimme joikkaleimme lululu alalululu. Raanes maailmasta pasha imni, vai slundon olomo hiilukäynet. Teio lo 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 lo. Nasten heitä joikkaleimet, kirehkäi nuujo särradijo. Ja oikkaleimme, japsadeimme, huikirteimme, huradeimme, hailideimet. Jaskudan maailmestar passanua, tai vaifas olmo laulukohtet. Teio no 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 no. Nasten heitä joikkaleimet, kirehkäi nuujo särradijo. Teio Yes, thank you. Now we are closing the moment of wrapping up our conversation. So I was wondering, Gloria, if you have some reflections finally here to pop us up.
Yeah, I have so many synchronicities and stories. I wouldn't know what to begin with, but I would think I'd like to do something that has it extends between Leonora and surrealism, and me and shamanism, and it sort of launched me in my career. I was in Oaxaca, having visited Leonora and stayed with her family while she was in New York, but then she was going to stay for a while. So I helped someone out and we went to Oaxaca. And coming up along, it was very, very busy in their square, their public square, which is round. And someone came over, a very, very nice, handsome young man, and he said, I see you are Americans here, and I'd like to sit with you. So I said, fine. So he brought chairs and we sat, and he said, I've just come back from NYU, where I was attending the Comparative Literature Association of America, and I thought I'd just stop off here before I went home to where I live. And so I said, oh, NYU, that's where I just got my PhD. Oh, that's interesting. What field are you in? So he says, well, I'm in comparative literature. I said, what are you writing on? He says, I write on surrealism. So I say, like, oh, I don't believe it. I'm in the middle of Oaxaca. I've never been here before. And here it goes again. So then it turns out we have so much in common. And I was staying in Leonora's house and he wanted to come and visit. So he did. And then he said to me, I'm launching the very first surrealist festival. And he said that it was the 50th anniversary of the Manifestos of Surrealism. And did I know that? And I said, yes, I was working with a little journal in New York also. And so he gave this major party, major, incredible launching of a surrealist festival. And people came, like I think even Merritt Oppenheim was there, people from surrealism who are not with us anymore. And it was really extraordinary. And the reason I wanted to bring this up is because this was Bob Lima, and he was teaching in Penn State, and he died recently. And I think I'd like to remember him for that big surrealist festival that was a launching of sort of a gathering of spirits who were interested in surrealism. So I just want to take a moment to think about him as we celebrate surrealism. And he did come to stay in Leonora's house and visit me there. And then he came to New York, and we were always communicating with Leonora. So there was another connectivity, interconnectedness.
What a wonderful start of a conversation. Susanne, I'm turning to you and want to have some inspirational remarks here.
Well, I'm just so happy to see Gloria again, although we are very far away. And I'm very happy to hear your yoik. So all I have is gratitude for this event. Thank you.
Yes, thank you so much, everybody who has been here.